Okay, we are at the magic hour of 2 o'clock for Sundays at 2. Isn't that convenient? My name is Lucia Scholwer, and I'm the chairman of the Sundays at 2 committee. We have 6 members of our committee, but today we only have one other member, Sheila Stepko, who is here. Our other members are traveling, and so we will welcome them back for our next program. But we couldn't do any of this without Alice, who is the director of the library and ex officio member of our committee. And we truly can't do it without Shelley Robertson, who is the technological guru for the library, makes all the things work, and we're grateful for that. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Sundays at 2 program. Can I see a show of hands of how many people are regulars for the program? Okay, so many of you are, but not all of you. So I want to tell you that this is the 29th season of Sundays at 2. 29th season. We have had, it was founded by Gloria Wallace. If anybody knows Gloria, she was a force of nature, to say the least. But she formed this committee, and she was the chair of the committee for 25 years. She stepped down, still participated in the committee right until she died at the young age of 97. I can assure you that she was a vital leader throughout that period. Ernie Monshine, who's one of our committee members, who's not here today, he was the first chairman after Gloria, and he stepped down last year, and I started in the fall. So we also have Sandy Toomey, Pat Tracy, and Bud Ward, who are members of our committee. And when you come to future programs, you'll see them as well. So the program has been offered in the January to March time frame for all these years. We only missed one season out of that. Otherwise, it would be our 30th season, and that was for COVID. But we have had, in that time span, over 170 distinct speakers' topics. That's a lot of information and star power coming to our little rural area of the Northern Neck. The topics are different every year, and they are always varied for each season. We have global and local. We have history, art, travel, politics, science, economy, music, business, technology, you name it. This year's season, we had local business challenges, NASA. Brad Perry, our speaker for the last time, is here. America's War on Drugs, organ donations, artificial intelligence, and we have a new, the last speaker is now Linda Odom, who will talk about the life of being a private eye. So, lots of things to look forward to. We welcome everybody who is here and those who are watching on Facebook. And if you want to watch, if your friends miss it and you want to flag it for them, they can watch it on the library's YouTube channel. You received surveys, and I'll ask you to please fill those out. That helps us do better with each season. So we welcome your feedback. And there's an opportunity. Alice, do we have lottery tickets today?
Yes, we do have lottery tickets for sale.
We have lottery tickets available. And the special thing is when you buy a lottery ticket, even if you don't win the lottery, you still get to come to Sundays at 2 for free. It's a great deal. It's a great deal. So, but you also make a lot of money, and you're certainly helping the library, which is near and dear to all of us. So before I introduce our speaker, I want to I'll ask you all to hold your questions until the end of his presentation, but he's leaving plenty of time for you to ask questions. So this is Terry Burke, and if I try to detail his career, we won't have time for the presentation. He's done it all. At least
Not all well.
or at least he's done a whole lot. He retired in 2017 after 65 years of military, federal intelligence, and law enforcement service and international private investigation. He started his international career as a young Marine security guard at the embassy in Rome in 1959, which I will note is the year of my birth.
You shouldn't. You don't need
But
Make you feel bad.
I will point to Terry and I will tell you, this man can run circles around me right now. So he entered college at Georgetown University in 1960 and concurrently joined the CIA, where he spent 10 years as a paramilitary officer. He spent the next 21 years as a federal drug enforcement officer, rising to deputy and acting administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. Upon retirement from DEA, he spent 8 years as a member of the Alpine Rescue Team in the Colorado Rockies, and the next 16 years running an international private investigations firm. Since his retirement in 2017, which same year as I retired, so same. He has pursued his lifelong love of woodworking, including building the door for the Colorado Mountain History Center, which is seen in the flyers. So the picture of Terry in the flyers is in front of that door that we need. Terry laughed at me when I described him as a Renaissance man.
I don't know what it means.
But I'll let you be the judge of that. At a minimum, he's had an incredible life and career. The promotions for his books about his daring work in Laos for the CIA and in Afghanistan for DEA say truth is better than fiction. Veteran New York Times and LA Times journalist and playwright Bernie Weinrob said, in his adventurous career, Terry Burke was known for his honesty, his integrity, his candor, and his courage, holding himself to the highest standards. I can personally testify that he tells great stories.
Especially after martini.
And that his truth is definitely better than fiction. So with that, I turn it over to you, Terry.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. Before I get started, I need to do a little check of the audience. I've served in Italy. I think the next one was the Philippines, Afghanistan, Thailand, Pakistan, India. Where else? Holland. Is there anybody here, whoever was there at the same time and knew me and knew of me there? Oh, thank God. There's nothing that'll ruin a good story like an eyewitness. So to start off with, I'd like to thank Lucia, Alice Cooper, Sheila Stepko, the board, and Shelley Robertson that was put up with me all week to come over and let me do some practice runs on this talk. The first one that I like to show is a tribute. And you look at, can everybody see that up there? So because I'm going to let you all do some reading and save us some time too. Is that better?
Yeah.
There you go. Look at the figure up there, the number of people who died. And if I had pushed that back, even, like 10 years, 15 years, we would have at least doubled that. And one of the things that really bothers me is where you see the line with the number of police officers just in the last year who have died, number one. 2024 was 25%, there was a 25% increase in the deaths of officers in the United States over 2023. Now, the other thing, you see the number of officers that have been shot. And I think that probably I missed a few because I was going on the national law enforcement officers sort of memorial site. But the press always uses the terms when somebody's been shot and they haven't died, they'll say that they were life-threatening injuries. And I hate that, because if you have been shot in the head, or if you had a nerve-shattering shot to your arm or to your gut, your life, that is threatening. It's not that it's threatening you're going to die, but it's going to threaten that your health is not going to be good for the rest of your life, very likely. So just keep that in mind when you hear the news on somebody who's been shot. It's very serious. Now what I'm going to do is go down a list now of the agencies, not all of them law enforcement agencies, but the number of agencies that are involved and have been involved over the years with the drug effort, I'll call it, not the drug war, but the drug effort. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what one of these agencies might be and wants me to clarify? Okay, we've got that. The one agency that shows up down there that's unusual in a lot of people's minds is the State Department. You say, what's the State Department got to do with this? Well, since the 70s, the State Department's had a Office of not investigations, but of drug, international drug service and so forth. And they provided funding overseas for the local governments for training and so forth. But the thing for me in those areas are that I served in several embassies, and I always got tremendous support. In Afghanistan, I worked under the Robert Newman, the best man I've ever met. He was amazing. He was the ambassador, and son later followed him as ambassador into Afghanistan, and I think you served with him. And the thing was that I'd have to go to them. I was working by myself in undercover, and I needed a flash roll many times for an investigation where I had to show the money to the crooks so that they delivered the dope. And I didn't have that kind of money with me, and I'd go to usually the station chief of the agency, and I'd walk out the door with $7,000 and leave them sweating behind because they weren't sure they were going to get their money back. I did another one down in Karachi, and not only did the young lady from the consulate office show up with the consul security guy with $10,000 flash roll in the Intercontinental Hotel, but she brought that, and she wanted to get in on the scenario and make it look like I had a beautiful girlfriend, and that was very helpful. Because the bad thing was that the cops tipped off the crook, and they never showed up. And myself and the other agent had to quickly check out of an expensive penthouse apartment or penthouse room and check into a cheap room where two of us and our informant share the king bed. So that can happen sometimes too. But throughout my career in Afghanistan and elsewhere in India, I did a pretty significant undercover case there, posing as a crooked diplomatic courier. And they were keeping an eye on me there at the hotel I was staying at. And the only way I could communicate with anybody was through the embassy security officer. And we did it by having, if you're familiar with the term, brush contacts, where you pass a piece of paper with your information on it. And we used to use the gift shop carousel for the postcards. And he'd come in, go one way, I'd go the other. As we passed, we exchanged messages. So I would tell him how the thing was proceeding. We needed clearances. I think it was in 5 different countries that allowed me to carry 2 suitcases full of dope back to the States. And he handled the whole thing. It was flawless. And when the embassy helped out later, when the Indian, after I went to testify in the case, and the Indian prosecutor provided a motion to the judge that I be arrested for illegally carrying the drugs from the country. And the embassy jumped in when I went racing back there. He said, get me out of town. And they helped me, and it took 2 years for them to get notification from the government of India that they would not arrest me if I'd come back and continue my testimony. So my hat's off to the State Department. The intelligence is a good lesson here in how sometimes the government works and things happen. We've had the DEA Intelligence Center in Washington for, all the predecessor agencies, and strategic intelligence primarily. We have the Intelligence Center down in El Paso, where representatives of all different kinds of agencies, state, local, federal, work. And what happens is that in Seattle, a police officer or some officer sees a boat that's suspect to him, or a car that's suspect. They can call Epic immediately, and there'll be somebody there who can tell them the history of that vehicle, if there's been bad guys involved and so forth, and it helps their investigations. And that's what you call that a tactical intelligence unit, very important. The one that shows kind of how things happened was in 1989, Congressman Murtha from 12th District of Pennsylvania, which is Johnstone, Pennsylvania, had the Joint Chiefs of Staff in, and prior to approving their budget, and told them that they didn't put a certain amount of money, which is very large, into a drug intelligence center in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, staffed by every agency and so forth, permanent structure and all that, that they weren't going to get their Defense Department budget. So, in 1993, they opened the new center up there in Washington. All these poor folks that didn't even know where Pennsylvania, where Johnstown was, and they got moved up to there. I'm not quite sure what they did up there, but I'm sure that, again, I'm not being critical of them. I'm sure that whoever is there and whatever they're doing, they're making their best, but I'm not quite sure. And what I'm talking about here is the redundancy in a lot of the programs in the government. Is Bill Barr? No, Bill Barr's not here. Our neighbor, Bill Barr. Because Bill Barr was my supervisor, if you would, when I was running DEA. He was the Deputy Attorney General at that time. And someone in his office wanted to create a drug intelligence center in the Justice Department. Everybody I talked to was against the thing, but this one guy was really pushing it. So it came time for me to go before the OMB officer in charge, a lady, very nice lady, which was very tough, to take our budget up there and explain what we were trying to get and how much we needed. I did that, and as I knew she would, she asked me what I thought of the proposal that the Justice Department wanted funded. And I was facing her across the table. Behind me was the Justice Department budget people, who were reminded me a couple times before it started that I was expected to toe the line and say good things. So I gave some kind of a vanilla answer to, I'm sure they're really interested in doing this, all this kind of stuff. And then I looked at her, and they couldn't see me. I rolled my eyes. And she looked a little startled, and then I got this signal back, gotcha. And it never happened. It's amazing how things work in Washington, D.C. And the other thing is that then in, I think it was 2000 or so, they created a new agency, the General Counter Drug Interdiction Plan, to coordinate with all the other agencies. And fortunately, they wrote a report, and I don't think anything ever happened beyond that. The things that have worked, one of the main things that have worked very well are the task forces throughout the country. There you go. Thank you. I had a good talk with Sheriff McCroney here. He spent about an hour with me, and when I was doing my research to bring me up to date, because as I said, she said I retired in 1989, or 91, 91. And they have these small departments don't have the manpower in a rural area in particular to have their own drug task force or their own drug officers working actively in the area. But you'll see in the paper a couple of days ago, there are more drug arrests here for manufacture or at least distribution and so forth. So what happens there's a task force, a kind of a regional task force here. And officers from different Tappahannock and Williamsburg and so forth, they're all in this task force. So the problem is that an officer can grow up in Kilmarnock, go through high school, go through grade school, become a police officer, sheriff, deputy. He can't go into the community and work undercover to develop a drug case because everybody knows him. But he can go to Tappahannock or he can go to Williamsburg. And that's how they work, and it's combined. And it's very well run, and I'll tell you, I was very impressed with this presentation. The OCDEF task forces, they were very good. When I came back from Afghanistan, I took over a state and local task force in Miami. And we had, from under this program, we had 2 prosecutors from Justice assigned to us right there in the office. And what happened then was that we built trust. You could present an ongoing investigation, and they could say, Burke, that's nice, but we need X, Y, and Z. You don't have enough here. Here's the intelligence or information you're going to have to provide us before we can write an indictment. So that was very important. And then the other part of it, over a period of time, they got to trust us, and we trusted them. And so what that meant, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I remember one investigation where we'd been going all day long, and everything was wild, and we found out that the main man we wanted, the Colombian, had gotten away. But he was home. He didn't even, I don't think he knew what happened, what went down. We weren't sure. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, we needed to get a search warrant. All it took me to call Charlie Cruz. So Charlie, trust me, I got to get this guy tonight, because tomorrow he's going to be on a plane to Colombia. And I need a search warrant for the place to get him. And he provided it. And that was the kind of the strength of that process. But currently, I've talked to a couple of assistant U.S. attorneys this week. That's faded in some of our cities, unfortunately, because the U.S. Attorney's Office is located generally in the federal building in the downtown, for instance, Denver. And now, Denver, a few years ago, built a new building. They outgrew the building at the Customs House there, across the street from the federal building, and they're way out south of town. It's probably 45 minutes downtown and so forth. And so they're no longer embedded with a lawyer, or have a lawyer embedded with them. And they go back and forth and everything, but it's still not the same. The high-intensity trafficking area is, from everything I've learned, is a really good program in a number of the cities. And they're mainly providing training to officers and share of information in annual meetings. FinCEN, Treasury Department, been around forever. They sit there and try to track the money. They were trying to track the money going back to the cartels at first, and now that includes terrorist funding and financial crimes. A great help to law enforcement. We have DA task forces in local jurisdictions. Some of them they're really institutionalized. The one in New York, I got a note for because they were celebrating their 50th anniversary in New York. Some New York officers have spent their entire career in that task force and never had to walk a beat anymore. They like that. Now, what I'm going to suggest to save some time here is if you kind of try to read over that bit, so I don't have to. I hate to be sitting in the audience and have somebody have a PowerPoint presentation and tell me what's on the screen. But I would just comment that, as I say, my biggest problem sometimes with the Congress, and they would fall asleep. One of the big shot congressmen, after our plane had crashed and killed our DA agent and 3 State Department people in Peru, called me up there and wanted me to brief him totally. Sat down after lunch across the table from him. He had his aides on each side. And he told me, I need to know, we got to stop this. And this famous phrase we've heard too many times this week, it can never happen again. Well, it always does. But anyways, he told me that. And then he promptly fell asleep. And I'm boring, but I hadn't even started speaking yet. And he fell asleep, boom, like this. And I looked up and startled, and his aide told me, he said, no, you just go ahead and brief us, and we'll let him know afterwards. Oh, okay. One of the fellows, still very senior in the U.S. government, set up a briefing at his office, went up there, waited, and out came his lovely young lady. The congressman forgot he had a golf match this afternoon, and he's not here, but you can brief me, and I'll tell him what he had to say. And I said, bye. And then I had 2 congressmen, one a senator and one a still current, she is really old, current congresswoman. The first senator called up and wanted to know why I was transferring his agent from the Albany office. I'll let you guess who that might have been. But anyways, and I told him that he didn't have an agent there. I had an agent. And he'd been there way too long, which was reflected by his phone call. The other one was a very angry congresswoman who called me and said that DA was investigating a constituent of hers, and she wanted the DA to stop this investigation immediately, and she was greatly offended that we were investigating this very fine gentleman who, and first of all, I told her, hey, I can't even comment whether they're investigating or not. And she started really getting riled up and mentioned that if I wanted to get confirmed as administrator, which I knew for other reasons I was not going to, that I better start worrying. At that time, I told her that when she was getting into a legal area for herself, and she, what are you talking about? I said, it's called obstruction of justice, and I might have to refer this to the Justice Department. She slammed. So, other than that, we've had good support a lot of times. Agency budget request, I was kind of shocked. I went, he's dead now, he won't say anything bad about me, but I went before my Attorney General with our budget. The Congress have been very, very generous with us over the years. And with agents, new agents, we had a lot of agents. But we had groups that had been 10 to a person, let's say, and then suddenly became 15 and 20. We still only had one secretary. And U.S. Attorney's offices expect to have the DEA reports immediately, quickly. They got to get it in indictment and so forth and so on. And these poor ladies are sitting there with guys, come on, mine's more important, mine's more important. I said, we need X number of clerical personnel. We need tech agents who go up and put these hidden cameras in places and set up our wiretaps. We need that. He said, can't ask for that. Why not? Because Congress, they don't want to listen about clerical personnel and so forth. You have to ask for more agents. It was very frustrating. The other thing that's frustrating, getting in the area of things that impact, and again, I'm going to let you read most of this, but if you take a look at that chart, 10 years, for the last 10 years, the DEA has had, what did I say it was there? 8 administrators, 10 years. Average, 1.4 years on the job, and then they're gone. They all have to do the same thing. They come in, oh, that ain't working, let's change everything. And they're never around to see how that worked out. And by that time, somebody new has come in. And the other thing is that you need to have an administrator who knows who the people are, the ones in the agency who will really help them. Law enforcement agencies, as any of you know here who have any experience in that area, they're very unique cultures. And you really have to get in there, and they want to trust you, and you have to trust them. And I'd also note, I'm going to talk a minute about corruption, which is another big problem. But in the last 10 years, DEA has had the worst and major corruption cases in its history, in its very, very long history. And if the boss doesn't know what's going on, the other folks sometimes will go ahead and do what they want to do. And it's very bad. We need to let people, I think the FBI has the right idea until they get fired, that have a long-term head of each agency. As long as it's a good person in there and they can do well, I would really recommend it. Let me put on my list here. Reorganization. DEA has been renamed since, I forget how many years. We've been Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and then BDAC, and then BNED. I joined with BNED, Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. In '73, I'm over in Afghanistan. I get a teletype saying, you're not a BNED agent anymore, you're a DEA agent. Oh, okay, thanks. Duplication of efforts. The other thing that I'd recommend it to you, YouTube has a 60 minutes presentation on what they call the Iron River. And the Iron River is the flow of U.S. arms, highly impact arms, that are flowing to Mexico and being used by the cartels. And their study showed, let me get my hook, that in 4.5 years of weapons seized when operation caused weapons to be seized from the cartels, that, let's see, 566 of those weapons were from 5 dealers in Arizona. Throughout the United States, there's thousands of drug dealers, but they had yet to seize any from any other drug dealers in those 5. If you watch that, you'll see they interview the people who own that place. They say, hey, that 18-year-old kid came in here, and yeah, he ordered 5 or 15 AR-15s, and he passed background check and I sold them to them. And that's what they're doing. They're paying some young kid who's got a clean record to go in and buy, give them $5,000 like they're sending the young kids down to the border. They do it all through the internet. Send them down the border, pay them so much to haul the people from the border, the illegals from the border up into the interior of the country. And so that's been a dramatic thing. Isn't that true? Did I drop it off? Okay, the wire, sorry. They figure that between 200 and 500,000 weapons a year go from the U.S. down to the Mexican cartels. And that's scary. Now, corruption, pardon? They say, make sure I got it right here, 200 to 500,000 guns a year. But take a look at that. And so if you want to get the full details, the Iron River on YouTube, and it's a 60 minutes program, much better than I could explain up here, believe me. Corruption, you're always going to have corruption. I did a search warrant with the state and local task force until I knew who to get rid of. Down in Miami when I got back from Afghanistan. I'm in the closet of the big drug dealers, and I'm going through. He said, boots. The guy had money, obviously, throughout the place. I'm pulling out, like gallon bags of cocaine out of his boots and everything else. And somebody reaches over me, and there's a beautiful leather jacket there, a man's jacket. And I see his jacket disappear, and I turn around, and this police officer, didn't last in the task force beyond that day, was putting a jacket on and saying, wow, this looks good. And he was turning around and walk out the door. I thought, oh yeah. I thought, what's going on here? And I'd just gotten there and just started working with this group. So I was really worried maybe this is not just the guy. So I made him take it off, put it back. And I took everybody outside, I gathered around my vehicle, and made them empty their pockets. And you always have one agent or one cop it was the evidence technician, if you would. They gather, put it in the bags, mark it, who found it, where, and everything else. And all of a sudden, watches and rings and so forth appeared on my truck hood. And I forgot to turn that in to the evidence guy. Yeah. And I said, first of all, I fired about 3 of them on the spot and sent them back home to their offices and told their supervisors. I said, anybody else? The next time I'm putting you on handcuffs. And I didn't have any problems after that. And there's what I call passive and active corruption. Passive is as we arrested several of them, say a border area or near border area sheriff who he is approached by someone he might know, and probably does know, who says, Wednesday afternoon, I want you to go to lunch at the local cafe between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and take your guys with you. And here's an envelope to pay for lunch, take envelope. And just don't go near your little dirt airstrip outside of town here. And so that's passive. He didn't do anything. He went to have lunch. Meanwhile, plane lands, truck pulls up, unloads the stuff, and off they go. That's what I call passive. The active is really much serious stuff. As I mentioned, the number of agent arrested for selling information to the drug attorneys, the defense attorneys, to protect their clientele, which were the drug people. The agent out of Miami office just got 18 years, I think, for that. Another agent who was working undercover set up all his elaborate schemes in all the Bahamas and so forth, and that was supposedly costing all this money. And a brand new administrator and DA, I think, had no idea until somebody, I'm not sure how it culminated, but he had a massive smuggling ring going, and nobody noticed that he bought a huge, beautiful home way above his pay grade. He had 2 Ferraris, and he had, all the usual crap. And he got away with wearing the expensive watches because that's what he did in undercover role. And so that's the type of corruption that is really bad. Luckily, I hope it's not that. Another example of the passive is the customs agent standing at a post on the El Paso bridge. And he is contacted maybe by his cousin across the bridge. And, hey, what's your schedule for tomorrow? I'm working 10 to noon. Okay, and it's depending on the traffic. At 10:30, there's going to be a blue such and such vehicle with this kind of a sticker in the window, don't stop him, here's an envelope. Guess what happened? And the ones that the customs have caught, and they've caught a number of them over the years, they were doing this like for years, some of them. So it's a big problem. So I've already spoken about our programs with other law enforcement agencies, international. I got to speed this up here. And the problem here, we go down there, we set up these agencies where we work with these partners. We set up these special units, and not just DEA, but other agencies do this. Set up these special units, they vet them, they polygraph them, they train them, they get them as a fighting force otherwise unknown in that country. And that's what happened. All of a sudden, a new budget year comes by, and they decide not to, the Congress decides not to support that, or not to give the agency enough money to continue that program. So after all this work, and all the work convincing the high government officials and everything, whatever country that is, boom, these guys are on their own. They were making good salaries, much better than their colleagues who stayed in the regular police force. But now, all of a sudden, they've got lifestyles that the income now doesn't match their new lifestyles. And what happens too often is that these units will be taken over by a cartel. They've got a highly efficient U.S. trained group of people. They'll pay us probably more than we were paying them, and they become an additional danger to us. Temporary programs, I mentioned a couple of them in there. I won't identify out loud, but there's a couple of programs that have started, decades ago. There's only meant to be for one short-term purpose, to keep getting rolled over. The others, I think, are self-explanatory, and it's interesting on this. One of the failure of the administrations to address the problems with the primary countries is China is not only supplying fentanyl precursor chemicals to Mexico, but the finished product. And there's news today. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. Issues impacting local agencies. Again, I talked to your sheriff, and I think from all the sounds out here, he has told me that the county commissioners are doing a great job here, and he wasn't BSing me. It was obvious. He said they get what they need. They've got their own budget they have to worry about, but our gas prices have gone up with everybody else's. The cost for a new vehicle has gone up like everybody else, and we've got to keep competitive with our salaries so that we keep these good officers here. But he said, up to now, he said, I've got no complaints. So as members of the community, and if you know the people on the commission, I would suggest you give them a thumbs up and thank you very much, and basically tell them keep going, keep doing it. Overall issue. Demand. Are we winning? No. And what really amazes me is that somebody that you consider a normal person with a good education and everything else, they check everything. Because on their screens, on their TV screens, when an ad comes on for a particular pharmaceutical to benefit you and so forth and so on, nobody here uses that, so I'm sure. But anyways, they all come on with 10 minutes of warnings about this. Oh, by the way, we're going to cure you of this, but look what you're because you might get you. You have all those warnings on there. If you go in the grocery store, I'm not going to mention who I know that does this, but they'll stand and check all the ingredients on the box that they're going to buy. Whatever food product it is, you got to list every ingredient. That same person in a bar, in an alley, through a friend, or online now, will purchase a glassine envelope that's got white powder in it, having no idea. They think they know what's in there. They'll shoot it in their arms, they'll snort it, or ingest it by any other means. They don't know what's in there. And that's what's killing a lot of people. And that's the same thing with the over 60s group now in the United States. There are more deaths and hospitalizations now on overdosing on marijuana, not what they buy and know what the quality of the THC content is, but buying illegal because it's cheaper because you're not paying taxes on it, which you have to do with illegal, and the percentage of THC that some people use, let's see, when they're going to college in the 90s or 60s or whatever it was, that THC content was probably 3 to 5%. Average now in any one of these shops is 50%. And nobody knows to ask, oh, what's the THC content? They've developed, there's only two or three major companies who are actually in charge of all of the U.S. Illegal marijuana sales. One of them's a Canadian company, and either the other one or two are U.S. companies. $60 billion a year business. But when you buy from somebody else, what I meant to say was that they are now, they've got up to 90 to 100% THC in their products. You got to pay a lot of money for it, but as they proudly say in one of the YouTube videos that I saw on this, by the way, it was a New York Times article. I think it was a week or so ago on this whole subject of the legalization of marijuana. They're selling 100% THC content, which they say they have to pay a lot for it, but it will actually physically knock them out when they use it. Well, that's a smart thing to do. So supply countries say don't blame your country's demand. And to underline that is, where did I put that? This morning I read, in response to the tariffs that are about to be placed on, or have been placed now on China, the Foreign Ministry this morning said, fentanyl is not our problem, it's America's problem. And we heard that so often working with foreign counterparts that they would tell me, hey, why don't you stop your people from buying this stuff? So that's the question. So to wind this up, as I said, I use the term war, and I'm not sure that that's a proper name for it, but Nixon named it that, and I thought it might catch somebody's attention if I put that on my top topic. I think that, it may not be an actual war, but a national threat. I rewrote this morning, so I read a little more. But a natural threat that we can bring under control. I suggest we must reduce, as I said before, duplication of efforts with federal agencies. We need to improve, coordinate, sustain international cooperation. These are my recommendations, by the way. It's not anything official. Not try to legislate our way out of this problem. The state of Oregon tried to do that a few years ago by legalizing methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, everything. They've reversed that now because the damage it did to their citizens was just horrendous. Strong law enforcement is necessary, but it requires a currently strong national program for reducing the demand through what I think is going to be the only way to save us, and that's education. And education in our schools, and I had a very nice long conversation with your director of schools here, Superintendent Jessica Davis. And Jessica gave me a lot of information on what the programs on the school here are here. They've got some innovative things they do. One thing she mentioned, they've got some kind of a system they use in driver's ed, where the kid goes into some kind of a unit that it looks like you're driving a car, but it somehow or other blurs you as though you had several drinks. And it shows you crashing, and it shows you all the things. Something happened today. But anyways, it shows what happens, and I hadn't been drinking. It shows what happens when you are doing it. So they're very innovative. She asked for any material that I have. And by the way, I've got material up here that I got from the DA office in Virginia, because I couldn't, the DA's headquarters outward outreach program, I left 2 voicemails and about 4 emails to them asking for these same pamphlets. Never heard back from them. So show you how much they remember me. But I got them from the Richmond office. And but what I want to say is it's geared towards parents primarily. So if you're not a parent but you have a grandchild, then their parents might be able to use it. The most interesting one is the sheet of paper on there that shows what those, if I'm pronouncing it right, emojis? Sorry, what I have, up-to-date items. But it shows what, if your kid is on the computer, if you see this thing, it means that drug seller is offering him something to buy. It will show, there's another one for what the product is, the product, does it change all the time? But anyway, that's the current one that I have. And how much it costs and how to get your money to them and so forth. There's always little signals. So if you're curious, I ask not to pick one up if you don't need it, because I want to turn what I've got over to the school, because I could just I cleaned out their storeroom in the Richmond office. And so what I've got is right here, and what is left over I'll turn over to the school. The other thing is that in the education, it's not the schools, but in our youth athletic programs, in our church youth programs, and our youth clubs. Jennifer Mason and the Boys and Girls Club here, I met with her and talked about this issue, and was able to identify to her the DEA Foundation, which is not a government agency. It's a simply, what do you call it, NGO, there you go, NGO, the non-government organization. And what they do is that they have programs, they work very closely in a number of cities with the Boys and Girls Club. And they have grants. And they set up programs, whether it be athletic programs, whether it be dance programs for the kids, and so forth. So I've set her up with that, with a contact to the head of it, who unfortunately lost her home in California last week. She was kind enough to get the information to me while rushing trying to find a hotel room for herself and 3 kids. But that Jennifer was very receptive to that. And my thought here is that we reduced our tobacco demand through education, and why not our drug problem and our drug demand? If we've been sitting in this room, how many, a couple of decades back, there'd be this smoky pallor over the room right now, and there'd be ashtrays out here that everybody's been seeing. We got over that through education, not totally, no question about it, but you couldn't come into this place with it. Treatment. I don't know much about this area, I have no expertise, but we need a sound treatment program. Kentucky, apparently, as I've been advised recently, has come up with some very strong programs that not only get somebody just cleaned up for a certain period of time, but have continuing programs beyond that. And I'd say if you're ever in a position to suggest to the proper people to take a look at that program, it'd be good. Now, I'll tell you what I think is important. Really good news. On Thursday, I just read this today, on Thursday, the FDA approved a new drug I can't pronounce. I said, really, I don't know where they came up with that. It is a non-opiate oral pain signal inhibitor. It's for moderate or severe pain in cases such as bone breaks or post-surgery pain. This may bring the end to patients becoming addicted to opium-based painkillers. A factor that has been driven many to seek illicit drugs after their legitimate medications have expired. And that's a huge problem in the States, as you well know. So, that's it. I hope I left a little time for, how am I, 5 minutes over?
No, you're good.
Okay.
You turn the lights back up on. And,
Take a sip of water before we bombard me.
Do anybody have questions?
Terry, I've read your books, and I'd like to know how you managed to end up in Moscow at one point.
That's a good story. To get back here, 73 or 74, I think. I had identified 2 smuggling routes through the Soviet Union. And one, by a young fellow showed up with a Ferrari. He'd driven it all the way from Europe. He showed up this beautiful Ferrari. You can imagine driving through Turkey and Iran, what those roads were like in the 70s. He got there. He came in to see the council officer. And he wanted to sell him his camera set. And meanwhile, the council officer was good friends, and again, I talk about the help I got out of the embassies. He came to my room, he said, Terry, I got this guy over, he's got a Ferrari. And he's not going to, and he said that he was going to sell, oh, I know why, he said, come and talk to him. So I went over there and said, oh, beautiful Ferrari, oh, your camera, maybe I'll buy it. And how about the Ferrari? Oh, it's not for sale anymore. I've already committed it. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I brought it out here for a member of the royal family who was going to pay me a lot of money for it. But he turned me down, so I've already made arrangements to ship it back to Italy where I got it. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. You drove all the way out here, right? I believe every word you're saying. So he told me, I thought where you're staying. So he told me he's leaving the next day. And so that night I started driving up and down all these hippie hotels. And even we don't have many good ones. But in any event, checking places out, looking for that Ferrari, couldn't find it. So he takes off. So I got the list out of shipping companies who would ship. There were only 3 of them, I think. And in the first 2, I walked in the door and they recognized me and threw me out. Luckily, the second one actually owned by a friend of mine, Fred Sakali, in Lebanon. And he said, oh yeah, let me get the paperwork on that. And he gave me the paperwork and showed where it was going, the most crazy route. But it would end up in Odessa and after on a ship. And then it'd go from Odessa by land into Italy. And it was just crazy. And so I thought, that's not going along. There's something in there, I think. And so we notified the Italian authorities, and when the guy arrived to pick up his Ferrari, he got busted, and he did 8 years in Italian jails, which are not, for them at least, were not very nice. And so the second thing was, I got more information that they were using containers, full 40-foot containers, and loading, basically, people talked at the time that the hash wasn't that important. Well, in this case, as in my Indian smuggling case, they were soaking the sticks of hashish in opium. And they were sending 40-foot containers of this. And it would go up to the port, the railhead, in south of Tashkent in southern Soviet Union. And then they'd cross over the Soviet Union. The customs agent would be paid off to put their customs clamp on it, the wire stickers and all the stuff they put on the seals. And it'd go all the way across the Soviet Union and then into Europe for 100 destinations, the United States and Canada. Meanwhile, all these Russian tags would be on it. And now, what would Russia be smuggling to the United States? Nobody looked at those. Or into Europe. They didn't look at them. So I started tracking those and figuring out what Afghan people were involved in the shipments. So luckily, as I mentioned, Ambassador Newland was great. I didn't dare tell anybody else in the embassy, but I went up to see him. I said, I gotta get in touch with somebody in the Soviet Union. We gotta stop this route. And he said, well, it was about the time, I think, I can't remember who was in charge of the Soviet Union at that time, but he was about to go off to the U.S. to meet with our president, and things were a bit of turmoil. But in any event, he said, how are you going to do it? He said, wait, I don't want to know. And so what I did, I went downstairs, I took my Jeep, or my Toyota, and I changed license plates on it, which were local plates, so I could do surveillance on people in town, and stole somebody's diplomatic tags off the car, and drove over to the Soviet embassy, and pulled up the gate, it was all well guarded, and said, I need to talk to somebody about drugs. And they're looking at me, I gave them my passport, showed them my passport, and they said, wait a minute. So they called in. They called, oh, wait. So what I figured was happening was they figured they had a defector on hands, and they were calling for the Aeroflot plane out of the airport to get ready to take me to Moscow. I was going to get to Moscow, right? That's what I wanted to do, but not that way. In any event, I ended up being greeted and met by a very fine gentleman. He was the only Soviet officer who lived outside the embassy compound. They all lived in the huge compound there. And he and I started meeting at his home, in fact. And he spoke excellent English. He was really interested in this. And we had a series of meetings. I laid out to him what was going on. And he had to go back and talk to them and so forth and so on. And then I notified the embassy after he came back and he said, we'd like to invite you to Moscow to brief our head of customs. And so I had to go to the State Department to get approval in the embassy in Moscow, which they coordinated. I had a great science attaché there who met me and took care of me there. So I flew up, and I got really lucky on the way up, because when I was leaving, I see these group of 2 or 3, 4 Americans there, and they're thinking, I said, where are you going? Oh, we're going back home to the States. Oh, nice. You're going to Soviet Union. I was thinking that's earlier, and it aroused my suspicions. So when they arrived in Tashkent, which was the stopover spot on the right, and by the way, there's a 12-hour flight on from there to Moscow, prompt job. I got behind him at the immigration, so I could get his name, and I spotted his name. I saw him later. All of them were sitting together because we had about 2-3 hour layover at a table and having lunch there at the airport. So I went over and joined him, and I started and my nervous roll. What's that? What's that? Oh, I'm worried. Do you guys know about this? Oh yeah, we come and throw you a lot, which kind of helped me out. And he said, and I said, well, he said, what's the matter? I said, well, I'm carrying some presents for some people back home, and somebody told me this was a good way to get presents home safely. And and they started laughing. Meanwhile, I bought about 4 rounds of beer. And so they started telling, oh, we're very familiar. We take presents back too. Oh, wonderful. How do you do it? What do I have to do? And they explained to the dumbass guy sitting next to us, explain exactly how they do. You get into Moscow, and you get the connecting flight to Berlin. And then you get on the underground, for any who served in Germany, you get the underground, which goes right over underneath the gates, and you're in West Berlin. Nobody's checking. Hey, thanks. Okay, great. Gee, I'll try that. So it really worked out well. So I got into Moscow, and when I got there, first thing I got the science attaché, I said, I got to get to the embassy and send a message to Frankfurt, to our agents in Frankfurt, to alert the German authorities, because I checked these guys were out, I knew when they were going to arrive. And they had a welcoming committee, a surprise, when we got off the underground. So when I met with the chief of customs there, and it was classic, it'd be out of a movie, this huge man with epaulets and all this stuff, the Soviet commissar, was behind his massive desk and a big hammer and sickle over it. And there was a lady interpreter there, and there was a gentleman there who was in civilian clothes. He never said a word the whole time. I wonder who he is. So anyways, I explained BNDD was now dead. It just changed over to DEA. So I gave him the BNDD organizational chart, which actually told nothing. Said, here's how we organize, here's what we do. Here is a list of the Afghans who are running these operations. And I said, sometimes when they come through here, they come through to check to make sure everything's going through here fine. They may come over and probably stay overnight or so in Moscow. Okay, so basically in Russian, of course, he said, tell Mr. Burke the next time they come through here, we'll know how many strokes he uses when he brushes his teeth. And I hadn't being a mouthy guy, I almost said, how many do I use? But I didn't say it. I'm sure they do. And I spent, the only bad side of this whole trip is I spent a week there with nothing else to do. And I went in and out of every store, every agency person I ever knew, I sent a postcard to and just signed it, from Russia with love, and signed it, and let them to explain to the bosses who was sending postcards from Russia, from Moscow, from the Soviet Union, excuse me. And so I got back, and they assigned a person in in Kabul, to be my liaison, to turn information over and exchange information. Turned out to be a very beautiful lady who worked in the embassy there. Or she was she ran the Aeroflot operation. I found out later their husband was the KGB chief there. But we got along fine. We've got a few more people. And by the way, I did mention to that Soviet commissar that, I wish we'd met the day before. I told my story about the travelers, and the Germans got the thing. And, sorry that you didn't get the rest right here. And he was very upset. And later the science attaché said, do you know what a pain in the ass would have been for me to have to have their councils handle these guys in prison here, these Americans? He said, I'm glad you didn't get here when you did, earlier than you did. But those kind of things worked, and it was always cooperation. And sometimes I remember, I won't name him, afterwards, the station chief found out that the ambassador, before I went to Moscow, called the station chief in after I'd gone to the Soviet embassy there. And I briefed him on who I'd met and so forth and so on. He said, he's a GRU intelligence. He's in charge of GRU intelligence. And what are you doing, Burke? This is my turf. My responsibility is to develop contacts in the Russian embassy, the Soviet embassy. And the ambassador looked at him and said, how many do you have? None. He said, well, Terry's got one. He'll share the information with you. So it's kind of fun. So anyways, enough more stories. Questions? Any more questions?
There's another,
I just have a question about the people on drugs. One of the problems I know some of the countries have is keeping the people that are on drugs into the rehab clinic. Is there anything that people can do? First of all, they always have to do it on their own. They can't be forced into the clinics. Are there changes in the laws where you know someone that's in, you can force them into it?
I couldn't answer that question. I'm sorry. As I said, I really don't know anything about the treatment program. Certainly nothing current. I'm not quite sure where you could turn with your question either.
other questions?
I saw the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah.
So do a lot of these drugs go through the mail?
Oh, they sure do.
UPS and FedEx?
They sure do. And one of the best examples of it's not the post office, but U.S. Customs. If you watch on television how to catch a smuggler, that series, and they show what the mail that's coming in from overseas. The customs people investigate all, check all these packages coming in. But when you look at millions of packages coming in a day, but the Postal Service does it too. And if they see a suspicious package, they will open it very carefully. If they find drugs in there, they'll contact either local police or customs or DEA, depending on who it is, and they'll try to make a delivery of that package and then arrest the person who receives it, and hopefully they'll tell them where they got it from.
One follow-up. So does that happen like within the United States from just the governor down in Texas and
I imagine it does, yes. But they do, they're not reading somebody's letter. They're not doing that. I'm talking about boxes and stuff going through. They have X-ray machines now. They don't even have to open the box. They know, just like you'll see on the smugglers, they're caught mainly because they toss the bag in the X-ray machine, and it shows that there's something in the side of that suitcase that shouldn't be there.
One last question.
I've got a couple of things to say. First of all, this sentence here, is this a war we can win?
I'm sorry?
Is this a war we can win? Yeah. And let me tell you why I can say that. I moved to South Florida in the 60s, right as it was a very popular area for all the cartels.
Cocaine war. I was there in the 70s.
Well, I've seen what drugs can do. I've seen them totally destroy the music industry, totally destroy families, children. I lost his father and a brother and a huge inheritance to it. That I've spent some time in ministries trying to do this. Having said all of that, I want to say thank you to you because you never gave up.
Thank you.
You're standing here today telling us all of this. You never gave up. And there's so many other people that either for various and sundry reasons, and you hit most of them up here, they give up. So thank you. Now, my real question is,
You sound like a member of Congress.
I don't care, well, so you may want to answer this. But in line with that, are most of the drugs now in-house, or are they coming from overseas like they used to be? In the 60s, nobody knew anything about making their own drug. Well,
LSD they did. Big time.
So they're not bringing the drug. The
No.
import is not as strong anymore.
Oh, it's just as strong. But what you've got to worry about now are these other artificial drugs that they're making. And they're being made right here by some very bright people. Just as though very bright people are the ones that manufactured the LSD back in the day. And they're inventive people. There's a lot of money in it, and they're inventing it. Unfortunately, very strong. And in the books here, it describes what the drugs are here. Not in the latter book. There's one of the other does.
It's like you said, it's the demand. When we cut off the demand, and I've seen the hard stuff. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Somebody else.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing this.
Well, this will be our last question, and then we'll break, and Terry is here for continued conversation.
Over the last couple of years, Netflix has done a lot of documentaries on Pablo Escobar El Chapo and Narcos Mexico, Narcos America. They're fascinating. We've watched a lot of them. I guess my question to you, two questions. Have you seen any of them?
I've seen it. I think I saw the original one. There was the one called The Last Narc. Anybody see that? And it had to do with Kiki Camarena was the DA agent.
Yes,
Who back
one
in
was
the
killed.
80s, back in the
Yes.
80s, where he was captured, tortured and tortured and tortured. There's a doctor that kept him alive during that period of time.
Just to torture him a little
Yeah,
longer.
exactly. But the task force was set up in Los Angeles to carry through with that. Task force did very good. There was one fellow who went way beyond what he should have been doing in that investigation, in terms of informants that he created the fellow who administered the last tire iron blow to Kiki Camarena in the trunk of that car. He made a DA informant, and he never served a day in jail. Okay? And I found that out, and I had him pulled off of that. And there, he's in that movie as the star. And he's the guy that just went too far, too often. The other fellow was on, one of the other fellows on there, and I thought it was perfect. It's perfect. He's doing it from they made it look like within a jail cell. He's talking about his story. And that's a man who now just recently died. But then I thought he's finally in jail because that's where he belonged. And this was a guy who was a petty thief in DEA. He would use his vehicle to drive from Texas up to take his daughter to school, his government vehicle, his daughter to school in Colorado. I found out that while I was agent in charge before me, a couple of series before me, in Phoenix, that he had impregnated one of the young Mexican girls in the office of file clerk, 18 years old. Got her abortion. His son couldn't keep his rent payment up on his house, on the apartment he had. This guy had the agents in the office rent the house, the apartment, pay the rest of the payments off, kind of rent it, and say that it was for debriefing informants. We questioned the agents, and they said we never took an informant there. He was that type of, I call him petty passive or not, it's not passive. We had an investigation done on that last one, and I recommended his firing. The next thing I know, we're getting calls from the senior senator at that time, senior senator from Texas, saying you can't touch this guy. The phone calls went to the Attorney General, and it became a brouhaha, and so he didn't. The third man served with me for a short time in Afghanistan, and he was arrested for suborning a witness in Detroit. He was fired. A year or two afterwards, the Merit Systems Protection Board said the DEA had missed the cutoff time for some report by a day, and therefore that we had to rehire him, pay back his back pay, and not of his pay when he had it, because he told us he would have been promoted to a senior rank in the meantime, and so you have to pay him back at that more senior rank, and he has to go to the office of his choice. Okay. I don't know how they're going to fire all these FBI agents they're talking about, because that Merit Systems Board is worse. But that's a frustration. And yes, I have seen, but that movie, all three of the people, I have no regard for. But they're here, they're made a lot of money on the movie, I'm sure.
How accurate were the movies?
Oh, I don't think it was accurate at all. Yeah. I wouldn't believe anything those guys said.
If I could just say something for those of you who don't know Terry, because I've done a little bit of research on Terry.
How deep?
Just from this last story that he just told, or what he just told about, one of the reasons that he didn't get confirmed as a DA administrator was solely because of reasons like this. That he's a man of honor. He didn't let people go away. He wasn't willing to go ahead and bend the rules. And that means, at least to me, everything compared to a lot of stuff that you see going on in the world today. And Kiki Camarena, who was tortured afterwards, one of the people who went after the torture was Terry. and I think we all owe Pete gratitude on that.
Well, thank you, Pete. And if you don't know Pete, he's the head of the Sea Rescue Service here and does a great job for this community.
I don't think I have to say anything else.
Oh, can I eat my cookies now? Thank you very much.
I can only echo these comments and say thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience. And not only did you do great things through your 65 years of career work, but you're still doing it. You're engaging the schools, you're engaging the sheriff, you're getting the programs and getting the materials in their hands. So your service has not been.
Well, thank you. I had a lot of catching up to do, though, because that's why I talk to these people.
And we're grateful for it.
Oh, you're
So
welcome.
I invite you all to join us for coffee and cookies in the next room and continue conversation with Terry. Thank you so much. Next Sundays at 2 is going to be on the 16th, and it will be Dan Noreen, February 16th, talking about myths and facts about organ donation and transplantation. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.